order. Today is Tuesday, July 19th, 2016. Commissioners McCauley and Robbins are here in Bellingham. Commissioner Briscoe is with us on the phone somewhere in Alaska. Let's see, we're going to start now with our public comment period. Anybody sign up? Dan?
We haven't anyone signed up.
Okay. In that case, we will, let's see, advisory committee schedules. We haven't had those meetings yet. If you're looking for the advisory committee schedules, give us a call and we will give you a heads up on that. The consent agenda, Diane?
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through J.
All right. Any quick discussion about any items there, gentlemen?
I had a couple, but they've already been answered by staff, so I'm good.
Okay. Commissioner Robbins?
I have nothing.
All right. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All right. Got an aye from Mr. Briscoe. Can everybody hear Commissioner Briscoe okay? Okay. And we will move right into our updates. I believe we have Tamara first.
Just so everyone knows there, I do have a live stream. I'm a few seconds behind, but I can see everything.
Tamara Sobczak, Director of Finance. Commissioners, this is our opportunity to talk about where we are financially halfway through the year. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. Actually, before we get started, I recently read that before presenting anything to a group, you're supposed to tell a joke to get everybody engaged and relaxed. So this is, what did the 0 say to the 8?
What did the 0 say to the 8?
Two something.
How about a date?
Nice belt. Thank you for laughing. Okay. All right, everybody engaged and relaxed. All right, so we always start out with the balance sheet, comparing the first 6 months to the end of last year. You can see that total assets decreased. This is pretty expected. We had some large environmental projects going on, and so this is our cash balance decreasing. Not alarming, not unexpected. Looking at liabilities, they also decreased, not because June 30th was lower than normal, but because December was higher than normal. Remember, we had contracts, large contracts going on at the end of the year that we paid in January. So again, that's the decrease there. That leaves net assets about $5 million higher than 6 months ago. So what does that look like for a trend? You know, over the past decade or so, since we've had the GP site, every single year we've had a dip in our net assets at year end due to the environmental liability increasing. 2015 was the first year that we were able to decrease that liability account due to the large projects that we had going on. So where is our cash? We have about $15 million in federal securities, and those are ranging between 1.5% per year, and they range between 1 and 5 year maturity. The balance of our invested cash is in the local government investment pool, and that yields us about 0.5% per year. Moving on to revenues and expenses. The first 6 months, we saw revenues of about $30 million. About 12.2 came from operating divisions, and we'll go a little bit more detail later. Over $640,000 came from our public priority divisions, and then over $17 million came in for non-operating purposes. About half of that is from grants. About $5 million is from environmental insurance revenue, and then taxes of about $3.5 million. How does this compare to last year at this time? Operating revenues and public priority revenues are tracking pretty nicely. Just the non-operating grants were quite a bit higher due to those large projects. Looking at expenses for the first 6 months, we had about almost $26 million. 6.7 of that came from our operating divisions, almost 1.4 from our public priorities divisions, and then about 17.7 million expenses for non-operating, and that was the environmental cleanup projects. Compared to prior year, again, tracking nicely year over year, operating and public priority divisions came in right at the same level as prior year. So looking at the operating divisions, aviation revenue is slightly under budget, mainly due to parking and concessions, and those are directly related to the decrease in enplanements, so not unexpected. Expenses also came in under budget. Some line items were over, some under, no glaring anomalies. And then net income was slightly less than where we expected it to be this time. Looking at marinas, revenues, again, here were slightly under budget, and that's mainly, well, actually fully due to Blaine moorage being lower than we planned. Expenses were below budget, and that is mainly due to the maintenance costs not coming in yet. As the summer months, as we move into the summer months, I expect this to true up with budget. And then the net income is right at where we expected. Moving down to the marine terminals, revenue is quite a bit higher than budget. This was due to the early termination for Superior Energy. It was a one-off revenue item that we won't see repeat this year. Expenses were well below budget. Almost every line item was below budget. That results in a net income higher than budget. But again, with that one-off revenue, probably see that level off a bit by the end of the year. Looking at real estate's revenues were just slightly over budget due to contractual increases. Expenses were below budget, which is not unexpected because of the maintenance costs. Usually we see those come in the summer months. Real estate's net income was about $300,000 higher than budgeted. So overhead costs, while all the operating divisions are watching their costs as their revenues decline, the overhead divisions are also participating in that. We're really watching our costs and trying to help out where we can as well. We're about $100,000 below budget for these divisions. The public priorities divisions revenues were very close to budget. Expenses were quite lower than we expected. Economic development is about $200,000 below spending where we expected that to be. And then our open space program, which is the landscaping and parks, is well under budget this year. But we normally see a lot of those costs come in the summer and the fall as we do those landscaping projects. So that's it for the operating side. Moving into capital, 2016 capital budget was pretty extensive, and so we have quite a few projects underway. We have the C Street barge ramp that's estimated completion in September. We have the All-American Marine that was bid in April, and we expect that to be complete by the end of the year. The shipping terminal warehouse 1 and 2 roof repairs are expected to be complete this month. The rail span repurposed at the shipping terminal is designed to 30% complete. The Blaine bulkhead temporary repairs should be complete in the fall. And then the permanent repairs, we have the design for those in progress. More projects in progress are the waterfront district grading, looking at completing that in September. Blaine Marine Structures, immediate repairs are in progress. The road at the C Street Terminal should be complete in November. We have the GA apron rehab project that's in progress as well. The temporary fix for the Fairhaven Shipyard Pier is in progress. The roof and siding repairs for the web houses should be finished in the fall. The All-American Launch Route fit-up float is in the design phase, looking at the 2017-18 in-water work for the actual work for that.
Excuse me, Tamara, is the roof and siding on the Webb houses, is that just in Blaine?
I don't know that. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. On top of all of those projects, we still have some that are yet to be started that will start late summer and the fall. The permanent repairs to the shipyard pier is scheduled to bid in November. The Zwanich bulkhead and other storm damage, we're looking at completing that in the fall or starting that in the fall. The Lignum building improvements, we're going to bid that in the fall. And then the miscellaneous water lines at Blaine, Cruise Terminal, FMIP, we'll also bid that in the fall. And then finally, the stormwater and utilities at the shipping terminal will begin that project in the fall. So we have quite a bit of work ahead of us. So what have we been doing? Fairhaven Boat Launch Floats. This is a project that cost approximately $550,000, but RCO participated and we received about $215,000 grant for that project. And it was completed in May, just in time for boating season. The cruise terminal staging booth was installed by our own maintenance crew at a cost of about $45,000, and that was completed in June. And the shipping terminal warehouse re-roof repairs, I mentioned earlier, warehouse 1 and 2. Warehouse 2 is complete. These photos are warehouse 1, so you can see the extensive repairs that are needed there. Nations Roofing has that contract for about $500,000 for both buildings. Nikki's Bella Marina, we installed a more efficient carrier HVAC system, and I believe that actually got the punch list done today. So a very, very recent project. And then finally, the All-American Marine groundwork. The left picture is the infamous Hager Hill before work started, and the bottom right is during work. And there's kind of a little fun fact about this picture down here. These excavators have a 6-yard bucket on them, so they can fill a truck and trailer with 4 scoops in 60 seconds. So it sounds pretty quick, but when you have 46,000 cubic yards of dirt to move, you kind of need a big excavator. And that dirt was moved down to the Cornwall landfill site. So this is the final picture of All-American Marine so far. Those 2 pieces of machinery on the right-hand side are the drilling rigs installing the stone columns. To support the building, it provides improved foundation for any seismic event. So that's it for capital. Risk management activities, there were no additional major incidents the second quarter of 2016. We still have that March windstorm that we're dealing with. Those bulkheads that were damaged by waves. We're getting a cost estimate and the insurance carrier has been put on notice. We have 2 open claims for the ports. The G East boat fire, work is currently out for bids to dispose the 12 boat holes of the GP site. And then again, that March windstorm, we're working on getting cost estimates for that. We have 1 open claim against the ports. It's the AMHS passenger ramp, and that verdict continues to be appealed. Stormwater program. Consistent attainment was achieved in the fourth quarter of last year, so samples were not required, and all training and record keeping are in compliance. We do have something to report on the safety slide. We had 3 recordable injuries in the second quarter, resulting in a recordable incident rate of 3.18 and a lost workday rate of 1.06. We did have 1 employee that had to be out on, have some surgery and be out of work for a bit. So what questions do you have or comments for me?
Let's start with Commissioner Briscoe. Any questions for Tamara?
No, none at this time.
All right. Mr. Robbins?
I have none.
All right. Not for you, Tamara, but I do have one for our engineer over here. What's a stone column?
Oh, I know the answer to that.
Oh, go ahead, please. Oh, wait. Tamara can answer it.
Stone column is a street name for what are called rammed aggregate piers. And in in soft or filled soils, such as the port owns throughout much of its property here on the waterfront, there are basically two solutions for foundations. I'm Adam Fulton, Director of Facilities, Port Engineer, as you call. The one solution is our piles, driven piles, and the other is to improve the ground improvement via rammed aggregate piers. So a pile, a stick in the ground, requires end bearing and friction bearing to sustain a load. The problem is when you have an earthquake, the ground turns into liquid. It's a process or a phenomenon called liquefaction, and the pile then loses any capacity that it had in its friction bearing. So what the other solution is what we're deploying, and it's what's deployed out in the Bellwether development, and it's called rammed aggregate piers or stone columns. And what they do is they auger down into the ground, say 30 feet down to bedrock. They inject stone, and then they compact it down there. It compacts down with, say, a force of 1, just for math, and then a sideways force of 4. So eventually they're going to make a 3-foot diameter stone column that has compacted influence to 10-foot diameter. And so then they pull the auger out 3 feet, they inject more rock, and they vibrate that back down in. And then they pull the auger out and they inject more rock, and they ring that down in until they get all the way back out to the surface. Then they have this 3-foot diameter stone column that has a 10-foot diameter circle. And then what they'll do is put like a dice pattern, like a number 5 on the dice, situated together, and that's where a column of the building will reside. And then you just build a conventional foundation footing on top of this improved ground. So at the Bellwether building, for instance, for the 2.5-acre parking garage, we inserted into the ground 900,000 pounds of rock every day for 2.5 months and made that a great big improved ground. So if we do have an earthquake here, that will be an island, and this might go away.
Just move a little bit. Thanks,
Yeah.
Adam.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Absolutely, yeah.
I have a question, Adam, on that same line. At 30 feet, are we finding bedrock to set this stuff against?
Thank you, Commissioner. The question, for those that may not have heard it, at 30 feet, do we find bedrock? It varies. As you can see back behind us here, this is the bluff. That is the historic bluff. 200 years ago, that was the beach. And then, of course, as we've all seen, this is just a sloping, compacted sand beach out to the tip of Bellwether. The tip of the harbor is, 500 yards out there. So the bedrock basically follows that gradient. So at some place it might be 30 feet. At other places closer to the beach it might be 10 feet. And then clear out at the end of our harbors or at the end of Bellwether Peninsula, it might be 40 or 50 feet down. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
You bet. Thank you, Adam.
All right. Thank you, Tamara. Okay, thank you, Adam. We're going to move on to our action items. Our first one, Adam, you're back up, and Diane, please.
A motion to authorize the executive director to, item 1, execute a contract with IMCO General Construction Incorporated of Bellingham, Washington, in the amount of $1,637,211 and include a contingency of $163,000 to $721 for a total authorized contract amount of $1,800,932 for apron pavement rehabilitation. Item 2, accept an FAA Airports Improvement Program grant in the amount of $2,024,846 to reimburse the port for 90% of the eligible construction management and construction cost for the referenced grant contingent project. And item 3, increase the capital project 101-422 by $2,055,000 for an amended budget amount of $2,555,000 to fund the project.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Adam Fulton, Director of Facilities. This is a look at our airport. North is straight up the page, and we're going to zoom in on this area shown inside of the green circle. The commissioners may recognize this as the general aviation portion of our terminal. Our most recent master plan for the airport now shows that area that was in the green circle, now highlighted here, as the general aviation area of the airport. And that is a change. There was thinking that the general aviation was going to move further south to the south side of our aircraft rescue and firefighting building. But now it's shown that it's going to actually remain where it is. And so as such, the airport is recommending that we go ahead and invest in the infrastructure there. And it just as to remind the commissioners, this project is 90% funded by the FAA. Do the commissioners have any questions about the project?
Commissioner Robbins?
Is this the project that was bid incorrectly they came back on? This is a different one.
This was bid, these bids came in originally well beyond budget. And we pointed out to the commission at that time that there were a couple of bid items that we had shown as, say, $50,000 items for security that our contractors came back and said, looks more like $350,000. So there was some spec language that had to get cleared up with our consultant. That has been done, and this is the rebid.
Thank you.
Commissioner Briscoe?
No, what Commissioner Robbins asked covered what I was going to ask.
We discussed this, I think, many years ago, but then it was taken off the table during the master plan? Am I recalling that correctly or incorrectly?
I think the commissioner is correct. The master plan for the area sort of changed, and I think very brilliantly. Sunil Harman, our director of aviation, came and looked at our master plan when he started work, I think just in January of this year, and saw that our commercial terminal shown here, the master plan was shown to kind of extend through here and displace the general aviation, which was then going to move prior to obviously being ousted. It was going to move over to this portion of the airport, immediately north of the Oakley hangar, immediately south of our ARF building. And Sunil's recommendation was that all that was being done to avoid one single wetland right here. And his notion was, well, if we expanded the terminal around here, which actually makes a little more sense for the building and for the property, then suddenly the GA could stay where it's at and we avoid a complete rebuilding of a general aviation area. And then it frees up this property for other development, which I believe he's going out for an RFQ even in the next month. So that's why suddenly the priority for this area sort of reverted back to what it is today, and thus the investment.
The RFQ that'll go out in the next month was slightly north of where you had the cursor. It's actually, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right there.
Yeah, it's right here.
Yeah, that's correct.
I do apologize. That is the Wang building there, and this is the ARF here, and this is the Oakley hangar. So it is right here. Thank you for that, Director.
Great. Are you going to put in a bid on that one there, your department? You got a perfect building for you already there.
Yeah.
Commissioner Briscoe, anything further on this one?
Question for Sunil. Is everything we're looking at here, are you good with everything, Sunil?
Hang on one second. Sunil's not here, but we are going to have a very competent person answer that for you.
Hello, Commissioner. Emily Philippi, the airside supervisor. So Sunil
Emily.
is out for the afternoon, but yes, Sunil is on board and has been working with the FAA actually very diligently with Adam Fulton to push this project forward.
Right, thank you.
All right. Is that it?
That's it for me.
Okay, great. Commissioner Robbins?
I have nothing.
All right. Thank you, Adam. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you very much. And move to our next item. Looks like Sylvia, you're up. And Diane, please.
A motion authorizing the executive director to submit an application to the City of Blaine for a minor amendment to the Blaine Wharf District Master Plan.
Good afternoon. Sylvia Goodwin, Director of Planning. This is a minor amendment proposed to the Blaine Wharf District Master Plan, and as you recall, a few meetings ago, there was discussion about a new proposed use in Blaine that would be a dry boat storage facility. Shirley McPherson and I met with the City of Blaine to find out whether that project would be allowable under the existing zoning and master plan, and the city told us, well, it really wasn't quite consistent with the master plan, and we agreed. The master plan for that area, as you just come down the highway into the Wharf District, we envisioned in 2007 that that would become more of a mixed-use area with offices, commercial, and possibly a hotel. And we were thinking at that time that some of the marine services businesses in that area would move down more to the industrial area. So the Wharf District plan talks about hotels and commercial and residential above, and it really doesn't say that somebody could build a new standalone marine industrial facility. So after our meeting with the City of Blaine, they pointed out that the deadline for the comprehensive plan amendment was the next day, June 30th. And we said, well, then I guess we'll get an application in. And we finished an application and submitted it the next day, but we did not have time to bring it back to the Port Commission prior to submittal. So my report in the York Commission packet today is authorizing us to submit that application to the City of Blaine. If you choose not to submit it, I told the City of Blaine we would pull that amendment and they would not process it. So they're waiting to hear from you. So the three things that we proposed in the amendment is that we took some language out that talked about how the web lockers were too far from the fishing fleet and that it really wasn't a good place for web lockers, because our new plan is to leave the web lockers there for at least another 5 years. We're adding siding to them and we're fixing them up. So we de-emphasized the fact that we were moving the web lockers. We added some language allowing standalone marine facilities so that we could put either a dry stack storage, which is a proposal, but previously I believe Commissioner Briscoe suggested that we might want to move some boat storage or some trailers for commercial gear or some commercial gear storage over there. Those are all uses that would be standalone marine uses if we didn't put dry storage that we might want to put in that area. And then this map here on your screen illustrates a proposed height increase. There are two areas. You can see them better up close. Here, I'll just use this pointer. This area right in here and the other area beside it are 45 feet and 35 feet. And we're proposing a 10-foot increase to put the height up to 55 feet along Milholland and then 45 feet along the rail. And that is what somebody would need for a dry stack. We left the 25-foot height closest to the boat launch parking lot. And because there's some view corridor issues in the city, that they want to preserve those views. And then the picture on the right is standing at the G Street Plaza in downtown Blaine, looking up towards White Rock. And you can see where those big trees are is exactly where we're talking about increasing the height. Those trees are taller than the height increase that we're proposing. So if we put a 55-foot building behind those trees, you wouldn't see it. At least that's what we would project. So if you approve this submittal and if the city approves the amendment, during the hearing process, we'll go out with the applicant, put some type of balloons or something up there to be able to double test how high would 55 feet be and look from the bluff to make sure you really couldn't see them. So that is the explanation of this, and what we're asking for is for you to authorize the executive director to submit this application.
Commissioner Robbins?
The only question I have, where the number 3 is there on the 55-foot height is where web lockers are now.
Right.
And the boneyard is down below that. This is just an amendment to the zoning we aren't planning to do anything at this time. It just leaves the option if we choose to do so.
Correct. We would have the option to develop any or all of those sections with either a marine-related use, and then we left the language in there that we still could in the future put offices or residential above or commercial or a hotel, which I still think that would be an excellent site for a hotel. It's just premature at this time. So we didn't want to forgive that future option. We just wanted to allow us to use it for marine uses, maybe even for the next 10 or 20 years.
So the real change right now is just those heights on those
It's
three
the height, and then
areas.
it's adding that marine-related standalone uses as an allowable use.
Thank you.
Commissioner Briscoe?
I have a question on the number 3 square there we see in the picture that you sent me, and thank you for doing that, Sylvia. We've got two 55-foot heights and then the 25-foot height. Now, the current web lockers, do they take up both those 55-foot heights, or is there still room available? And then do you know the height of our web locker roofs, the peak height?
Oh, boy, I did know. They're not more than about 25 foot high. They're one story with a loft. I'd say even at the peak, they're less than 25 foot high. And they take up probably just the northern one of those pieces. There definitely is room in the lower, the southerly 55 foot height area for additional development.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have an image handy of that? Because I would say that may not be true about the other web locker, the one with the steel roof, not the
Pulled up
flat
on
roof.
Google Earth.
Yeah, you can see them in the background of the trees on the other one, but I don't know.
pull up
It would be
internet.
that 3B block.
Earth, I don't know how to.
I'm looking at on the Google Earth right now.
That's all right. Just fine.
All right, there you go. Thank you.
You sure thing. Or you want to go to Street View, Rob?
No, right there, that's fine.
Yeah, just right in here.
So it looks like the block, the 3B block, lines up with that, sort of in between those two laterals down there, which I think is pretty much where that web blocker is right now.
Yeah, well, there's this fairly large lot here, which is the 25-foot lot, the 25-foot height. There's probably some area in here where the existing, they call it the boneyard, where all of the boats are stored, that there is that taller height, I would believe.
Now, click back to your other image, if you would, please.
Yeah, here, let me just,
Commissioner Briscoe, your question was about the web blockers right there?
Right, and at some point in time, that one's going to come down out on the
yeah,
on the jetty, so to speak, and we'll have to
looks
replace
like the area
that.
goes even with the wharf.
So the one with the white roof, which is,
The height goes, yeah, it would go right here between the two web lockers. So Commissioner McCauley is correct. This one with the white roof is within the 55-foot height, and I don't know how far below there is.
I see. So I guess with that said, can we go back to the city of Blaine if we need, say, 35 foot in that 25-foot area where the boneyard is now? Can we do that, or does this have to be done all at once?
Well, we could, you mean decrease the 55-foot height area to 35?
No, increase to 25 to 35.
I think it would be very difficult to increase this one area beside the boat launch to 55. We could ask, but the issue was that they wanted to maintain a view corridor from the end of the G Street Plaza and the H Street Plaza, looking both towards the Semiahmoo water tank and towards White Rock. And the G Street Plaza would look right across that 25-foot area.
Now, the photo you sent with the height photo.
Yeah.
Is that looking from the G Street Plaza?
That's looking from the G Street Plaza.
So our steel roofed web house we have down there now doesn't affect the view that I can see. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So if we were to put the same style of web locker to the east-southeast of that, next to it, that would have the same roof line, so it should not intrude upon the view, correct?
I'm going to answer that one, I think, because the image we're looking at right now, the trees on the left side of the photo are covering up about half of that web blocker. If you move that web blocker to the left and the picture was larger, you'd be looking at the side of existing buildings along the promenade, and that's certainly shorter than those existing buildings. Would you agree with that, Sylvia?
I think so. It's hard to say because we're standing here. This picture was from the G Street Plaza, really looking towards the north, towards White Rock. I don't know if you were looking further over towards Semiahmoo and you put a big 55-foot high building in that.
I think the question's if you move the web blocker over, is that right, Commissioner Briscoe?
Or built
Right.
in.
If we built another web locker, replace the one that's out by the dry dock now, if we moved it up there and used the same style of building roof line, that's why I was wondering what the height, that peak height of that building was now.
So I think, Sylvia, what he's saying is if you move that web blocker into the block here, you have labeled as 3C with a 25-foot height.
Right.
I would, just looking at what I'm looking at, I'd say it wouldn't change a thing because you just look at the side of buildings now, you just have another one in the foreground.
I would agree with that.
I would agree too, a 25-foot high. Would we really want to ask for a 55-foot high web blocker in that area?
No, that's not what I was asking at all.
I think he
asked
asked for
what the height-
35.
Okay.
Yeah, could we go to 35 then? Or 30, whatever it
Right.
took to cover the existing peak height.
Well, if you did in 3C, if you ask for 35, you would want to change 3D because that would be behind it to the same 35. But I don't see where we need to do that at this point.
Well, that was part of my question was, can we go back and ask for different heights in those that sections later, or asking for this now? Does that lock us in? Are we done?
Can we leave it at this? I'm going to offer a suggestion here that we measure the existing web blocker down by the dry dock, and if it's 25 feet or less, we leave it as is. If it's 30 feet, we go and ask for this to be 30, and if it's 35, we ask for this to be 35.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Okay. So
Question on the block 3D with a 25-foot height. Why 25 feet there? Because it's to the point that Commissioner Briscoe just made, it's sort of landlocked, or excuse me, Commissioner Robbins, it's sort of landlocked behind a 55-foot height in 3B. Why 25 feet there?
Well, you can barely see it. There's a little arrow right out there that shows that the view, there's another complex of buildings, the Drayton Harbor building that sits right along Portal Way. And I think when we first did this Wharf District Plan in 07, people were very concerned about the views. And they wanted all along the downtown there to be able to look out, see the boats, see Semiahmoo, and not have tall buildings. So at that point, the only areas that were going to be tall was right up along Marine Drive, closer behind the trees and farther away from where anybody might want to stand or have a building and look. So I think that the more that we do with taller buildings in there, the more public opposition from the citizens that we're likely to get.
So thanks for that. So I'm zooming in on the overhead image of this, and that, you're right, directly across to the right of that block 3D is the end of a street, and it looks like they're trying to use their street ends to overlook the harbor.
Right.
So the F Street right there.
Yeah, and there's this building
Yep,
right,
okay.
oh no, here's the train station. This is up here. Oh, this is F Street, right?
And I believe that little parking lot right there at the end of F Street, I think that dips down
Yeah.
off the edge, so you could even put a plaza with underground parking in there someday, maybe. Okay, all right.
So, and there's buildings right along here that wanted to be able to look out across the port property and not have their views blocked.
Okay. I've got a question about access. So in the past, there's been conversations about a walkway over the railroad tracks, and the most sensible place would be H Street
Yeah.
off the plaza they have there. It's it's, 100 and maybe 150 feet across from the plaza to a place where you could put a landing and then some sort of a way down. That would be a really fantastic way to get the downtown better connected to this waterfront, and I'd like to make sure that we're utilizing this waterfront to enhance Billings downtown. Is there any conversation lately about that?
There has not been a lot of conversation lately. That over the rail pedestrian walkway is still in the plan, and it still is on, I think it's even still on the port's list of projects that we would work jointly with the city. I think our obligation was to provide space for the landing, and the city's obligation was to pay for the over the rail walkway. I have not heard it discussed lately. Right now, though, the city is in the process of working with a company, Beck Consulting, looking at what they should do for their downtown to enhance it. It's a little empty downtown, and they're looking at a lot of different creative ideas. So I believe they're putting out some citizen surveys, and you'll probably be hearing more about that. This project might come back up again.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. A lot of people don't grasp the concept of, well, it's only 2 blocks to use the existing sidewalk, but sometimes 2 blocks.
Hey, how about now? Do you have a
Sounds like somebody's catching fish. Sorry, we're laughing at you, Commissioner Briscoe. Okay. Anyway, so 2 blocks can sometimes be a massive barrier, even though it doesn't seem like it is. In this case, with that plaza there, it would be a great thing. Can we request RCO funding to help with something like this?
We probably could. Actually, we're going to work with the city, or we're hoping to work with the city this next year to look into RCO funding to fix the end of Marine Drive. And the port's also probably looking at RCO funding to look at the airport bicycle and pedestrian trail. So I think we're limited on the amount of RCO funding. Plus, I think the pedestrian overpass is probably higher than what you could get with the RCO grant application. Is usually $500,000. Some of them are $750,000, and I think that one's more like $1.5 or $2 million.
Okay.
So there's lots of opportunities to try to match other local funds, but it probably isn't going to get 100% grant funded.
I would also wonder if there's any federal dollars for access over railways that we might be able to help
There
with this
might
one.
be. I can work with the city to look into that a little further, and like I say, we'll see what comes out of their survey. Dodd Snodgrass and I just met with their consultant last week and talked about some of the stuff that might be going on down at Port Property and how some ideas we had for the city. So I haven't seen what's coming out of that yet, but we'll keep tracks on it and give you an update.
Yeah, see, this city reminds me a lot of Lacey, where Lacey got its downtown severed by the freeway. So everybody lived on one side and the shops were all on the other. This one did the same thing, where the downtown separated from where the majority of people live, and then also from the waterfront by railroad. So there's some just distinct access issues for this city.
And there are times when those trains get kind of long and you have to wait for a long time to get back across.
Commissioner Robbins? Sorry, Commissioner Briscoe, do you have something?
Well, first, my apologies. There was one radio I forgot to turn off. And secondly, I'd like to echo what Mike's talking about, I believe, with the new park on the waterfront down there. And then as we move forward with the rehabilitation of the pier and over the access across the railroad, foot traffic bridge would be great for the people and the visitors of Bellingham. So it's something we certainly need to look into and see if we can help facilitate. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins?
Could you go back to the original picture you had here for a minute? Please, thank you. On the 3F is 55 feet high, but behind that is 45 feet. Why would you want that to be lower than the 55 feet?
I am not sure. That was something that they wanted it to kind of step down, so it was highest along the road, and then as there's a pedestrian trail along the railroad, that it would be wouldn't feel like the buildings were looming over the park or shading the park if they put a trail behind. I personally think it's unlikely that anybody's ever going to build a pedestrian walkway through the wetlands behind those buildings anyway, because you would have to deal with Burlington Railroad and you'd have to get wetland permits. But I think the idea was that if there was a walkway behind there, that you would want the buildings not so tall to shade them or loom over them.
Okay, thank you.
That's it? Commissioner Briscoe, that's it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So was there an alteration that you suggested, Rob?
Yeah, so thank you, Sylvia. We have a new business item. This is referring to a bid that was,
Wait, we have
Okay,
to vote on
wait.
this.
To pass this first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You made a suggestion about this.
That we measure the height of the existing web locker, one, and that
We'll
we,
pass it subject to that.
yeah,
Okay.
right.
All right, are you good with that, Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Okay, with that one small modification, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right, motion passes. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sylvia. Thank you. All right, and now we have a new business item. Adam's going to present it. I don't quite know what it is, so let's find out. All right. Is there, we don't have a motion for this, do we?
there will be, yes.
Okay, great. Do you have something?
This is, we made the commission aware of this when we rejected bids 2 weeks ago.
Gotcha.
And this is that coming back up. The bids were open this morning, I believe.
Okay. Can you read the motion? Thanks. Oh, that's okay.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a contract with IMCO Construction of Ferndale, Washington for the C Street Terminal Project, Phase 1, in the amount of $2,034,742.91, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $2,238,217.20.
Mr. Bolton?
Would the commissioners like a minute to skim read the memo?
Has Commissioner Briscoe seen?
Commissioner Briscoe, you probably haven't seen this. I just realized we probably should have emailed this to you. I can throw this up on the document cam.
Yeah.
Let's do that so that Commissioner Briscoe can see anything pertinent. Now, you're a few seconds behind, so we'll bear with that.
Okay, yeah, it takes about 10 to 15 seconds behind, I believe,
Okay.
or something like that. I haven't timed it, but I think we're somewhere in there.
You have a seizure. Did you see that? So Adam, was this was the one with the weird printing problem?
Yes, there was a there was a typo made on the behalf of. Thank you for that. There was a typo made on the behalf of our bidding agent.
I didn't even know paper came this skinny in that one. All right.
I'll look for your
Oh,
direction.
that's why. Okay.
Yes, exactly. I'll look for your direction, Mr. President, on when you'd like to begin.
What are we showing? What are we showing now?
We're showing Commissioner Briscoe the memo via the document.
All right, so Commissioner Briscoe, nothing's changed. We have the amount, though, and this is, how does this, Adam, how does this amount compare to the original?
Yeah,
original?
yeah, actually, no, I can't do that. The last time we bid this, the parent low bidder was $2.138 million. We now have, we of course thought we had an unfair bid process simply because there was a typo in our form as issued by our bidding agent, the Western Construction Reporter. So we just felt the fair thing to do is to simply rebid the project. We've done that. We've gotten 5 bids in return, all within 14% of each other. So very, very good bids, which is indicative of very, very good plans. It is the same low bidder, IMCO Construction, that was the apparent low bidder 2 weeks ago and is the same low bidder today. I'm sorry?
Did IMCO get this last time?
IMCO was the low bidder 2 weeks ago from the bids we rejected. and they rebid it along with 4 other bidders, and were low again. And just 2% below Ram Construction. So very, very good round of bidding.
All right, Commissioner Briscoe, I'd like to flip the page to the final in the printout here that shows all the bids from IMCO, Ram, Faber, Strider, and SRB. Let us know when you've had a chance to see that.
Yeah, I have them here in front of me.
The other way.
Is that what you're trying to see?
Yeah, I just want to make sure Commissioner Briscoe can see those numbers.
Yeah, you're referring to the attached in the that we got with our agenda here.
This was not in the agenda packet. This is an addition to the agenda. We didn't have the documents in time to get into the agenda packet because the bids were just opened today.
So now
Okay, yeah, he has a new one. Yeah, on the screen there, I see it now. We've got the IMCO, Ram, Faber, Strider. Yeah, no, I can see that fine.
Okay. Let's start, Commissioner Robbins. Any questions on this?
I don't. Just a comment that we knew the bids would be a lot closer once they all rebid it, and they certainly were. I just thought I thought Strider was a low bidder before, but I'm mistaken, I'm sure.
No, it was IMCO.
No, Strider was actually who we were going to award it to, because they were second, and because if you followed the letter of the law with the apparent low bidder last bid, which would have been IMCO, following the letter of the law would have catapulted their bid clear out to last place.
Right.
And so we were suggesting award to Strider. And then in conversation with legal counsel, we just determined that we had an unfair bid process simply
Okay,
because of a typo.
That's what I was
So
thinking.
commissioners, if you apply the rule that we apply to bidders, when we look at their bid, if they make a mathematical error, we correct the error and then revise their bid number. And that took IMCO from first to last. But then when we looked at the reason why IMCO may have made a mathematical error, we realized there was some disparity between the different bid packets that were printed by the agent. And so it would be unfair to hold them to the general rule because we created the condition on which they made the mathematical error.
Yeah, very accurate. Thank you.
But had we done that, it would have been Strider.
Had we done that, had we not created the condition that led to the mathematical error, we would have corrected the mathematical error, that's what the law in Washington says, recalculated IMCO's number, they would have been the high bidder, and then Strider would have been the low bidder.
Thank you. That's what I thought I remembered. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Commissioner Briscoe, do you have any questions? I know you had a little bit of limited information here. Same project, new numbers.
No, I got everything there. I saw the numbers and the information I got. So,
All right, great.
No questions.
Okay, no further questions from Commissioner Robbins, Mr. Briscoe. All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Hi.
All right, thank you. And
Thank you,
thanks,
commissioners, and I do apologize for we work very hard to have a very clean and integrity-rich bidding environment, and so I appreciate the opportunity to correct that with you and then get these good bids.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you, Frank. That's it for the break. We're going to recess to closed session, actually. We've got some more business to take care of. We're going to maximize our time with Commissioner Briscoe on the phone. We will reconvene our regular session at 5:30.
So Commissioner Briscoe, I'll call you in about 5 minutes.
to reconvene now at our 5:30 hour. We start with the public comments period. Anybody signed up? Anybody? Zero people signed up. All right, there's some people here. Anybody? All right, staff, if you want to rant right now, this is your one chance. Okay, all right, we're going to move on. Commissioner Briscoe is on the phone with us from Alaska, and we are going to start with something important that I don't have in front of me right now. Hang on one second. Waterfront District Property Eco District. There you go. That's what we're doing. Brian? Okay. My apologies. I flipped my folder closed here. There we go. All right.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental Programs. Sylvia Goodwin and I are going to tag team this presentation a little bit. As we've talked about in the past few commission meetings, we wanted to provide more regular updates on the Waterfront District, talk a little bit about what progress is being made, and forecast any upcoming items that we might need direction from the Commission on. So this is primarily an update on the recent progress that we've been making. There's a lot of projects that are ongoing right now. And we'll talk through those a little bit, the grain rebuilding, the All-American Marine Project, the capping work, the environmental capping work at the GP West site, as well as the ITEC purchase and sale agreement. Some of the upcoming activities that we have on the horizon, working with our partners at the City of Bellingham on the Whatcom Waterway Park planning and their roads and utilities work they're doing, as well as an update on some of the potential reuse of some of the industrial icons at the site. And then I'll pass it over to Sylvia, and she'll talk a little bit about eco districts and some of the zoning and land use areas that we have in the Waterfront District.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Commissioner Briscoe, can you hear everything okay?
Yeah, I can hear everything, and I can actually see everything fine here.
Okay, great. All right.
Okay.
Brian?
Thanks for the reminder, too.
Thank you.
So the majority of this update is really just some photos of activities that we have. There's a lot of work going on in the Waterfront District, which is great. I've seen some dramatic changes on the grain rebuilding recently. Harcourt has undertaken the emergency repairs and weatherization project on that building in full force, and they have removed all of the boards off the windows. They've started to work on the roofing, taken off of the sheet metal siding on portions of the tower there. They're doing some replacement of the significant structural damage that was caused by some water damage, and they're started to air out that facility to prepare it for the overall remodel and redevelopment of that building once they get a final building permit for the overall redevelopment of that. And here's a photo just from the inside of that building, which a lot of people haven't seen, especially with the windows open and the windows out. Going in there the other day, it's actually dried out quite a bit. They're doing a lot of really great work in there, and it's looking like they're making some significant progress on these emergency repairs. Moving on to another project, the All-American Marine. Tamara kind of stole my thunder here a little bit, and Adam, I was going to try to educate you on stone columns, but that was already taken care of. But no, but actually, it's really great progress is being done on the All-American Marine project. This is that's actually a photo of the site under construction now. That's one of the drill rigs that installs those stone columns. I think there's over 600 columns that will be installed on that facility. I think they're more than 2/3 of the way done. So we'll start seeing a closure of the dirt work and the site preparation work, and start seeing some active building of the structure itself here in the near future.
Hey, Brian, just so you can share what you know about the stone columns, can you describe how that machine, not the auger in the back, but the machine in the foreground, how that works?
I can do my best. I was going to educate you on the geology part of it, but Adam did that. I'll see if I can take this one. But no, this is the drill rig here, the auger in the background, like Adam explained. Augers in, opens up the hole for this machine, which has this hopper here. Takes the aggregate that's in this pile back here. Lowers the hopper, this front loader dumps the aggregate into this hopper, it raises it up, and that's then what goes down into the hole. As Adam indicated, then the dynamic compaction occurs, and as that compacts, they just cycle that through to the depth that they need it to.
So that machine compacts as well as?
Correct. Yeah, so the auger will pre-drill the hole, and then this comes in right on top of it and puts the aggregate into it and then compacts it into the hole.
Did you say there was going to be 600 of these columns on that site?
Over 600, yeah. I think it's almost pushing 700 of these stone columns throughout that area. So it's been ongoing the stone column installation has been going on for about 3 weeks now, and they're fairly close to wrapping up, and we'll start seeing more of the building structure being constructed here shortly.
And you said 3 weeks they've been going, they're going to have 600 columns just about now?
Correct. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Wow.
And one of the other items that was mentioned too was the material that was on that All-American Marine facility prior to the stone columns was that it's over 46,000 cubic yards of material had to be removed in order to get to the grades, and that was the hill that was out there that was on that location. And all of that material was transported over to the Cornwall Avenue landfill under an agreement with the Department of Ecology, where it's actually an early cleanup action on the Cornwall Avenue landfill site. That cleanup decision has been made, and we're under a consent decree with the Department of Ecology for the Cornwall site. And that design of the cleanup includes capping it in place and containing the refuse in place. And we needed to bring in fill to accommodate that. So we had 46,000 cubic yards of material that we took over to the site and placed it at Cornwall in its final configuration. So we won't have to be moving it again. There might be some minor grading that'll have to happen, but that should be a final part of that's an early cleanup action at the Cornwall Avenue landfill.
Why is it covered?
Well, this is erosion control matting. So there are some options when you place material and for erosion control. Post-placement, you can spray it with that bright green hydroseed in order to stabilize it, or you can put down this erosion control matting. And due to the timing of the weather, we would have had to potentially irrigate it if we hydroseeded it to make sure that would take. So this erosion control matting is put in place, and then it is seeded. And as soon as we start to get some rain, those seeds will start to germinate, and it'll turn into a grass-covered area.
And this one's not covered with plastic because it's cleaner than material next to it, which is covered with plastic.
Exactly.
But the entire site will be finished with clean material so that the park space on top is separate from any of the contaminated materials that are in the landfill and below.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
So there'll be a final phase of cleanup work that'll happen there where we will cap the whole area, and then the park will be built on top of that. And one other geotechnical part of this, which is kind of interesting, is that this is also another way to improve ground is to preload it. So you've compressed or densified all the soil below it to prevent from differential settlement. And this area actually, this amount of fill actually helps compress the refuse and the compressible soils below it, so there wouldn't be differential settlement in the future. So we have these settlement monitors that are placed throughout this to monitor how the settlement occurs over time.
See, I'm excited about this because the All-American Marine Project came along just as I was begging the mayor to take this dirt.
Yeah,
So this is good timing.
They aligned very well. They really did, yeah.
Yeah, because she needs it for this park.
Yeah, it worked out very well. So oh, sorry, Commissioner?
The contaminants that are in that, can you explain that so that people understand what's there?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, the material under the fill that was placed as part of the All-American project is actually very clean. So there are no contaminants that are in that material. We have unrestricted use of that material. There are low levels of dioxins in the soil or the material that's below the white tarps. That was material that was generated from our Gate 3 dredging project, and it has very low levels of dioxin. And so that is going to be managed as contaminated material that will be placed under the final cleanup cap on the Cornwall Avenue landfill.
Commissioners, I might add that 4 years ago, that soil from the Gate 3 project, that sediments would have gone to open water disposal. But ecology was able to start measuring dioxins in parts per trillion. And since they're able to do that, it no longer qualified for open water disposal. So now it comes upland. But the main reason it didn't go to open water disposal is it gets into the food chain of fish, which of course doesn't happen in the park. So it was just really a change recently by ecology that otherwise this would have gone out in a barge and be dumped in Rosario Strait. And they said, well, a couple 10 parts per trillion?
Yeah, 4.
4 parts per trillion now, it's considered something you have to take care of. So when people think under the park, it's like 4 parts per trillion.
Aren't both of these piles of dirt, aren't they both dredgings?
Yeah, that's correct, actually. Yeah, you're right. The material that came from the Hilton area was originally dredged from the inner harbor here, or the inner basin.
So the inner harbor was cleaner than,
Right.
Well, when it was, but that wasn't a dredge. It wasn't a dredge of the harbor. It was a dredge to build the harbor. So
Correct.
it was clean sediment out of the Nooksack in the first place.
Yeah,
Or
so it
as
was
clean as the
actually-
Nooksack produces anyway.
Right, it was dredging out the native, or the tide flats that were there.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for that, because that clarifies for the people that are listening or watching that
Right.
they're not putting something like that was at the GP site under their park.
Right, that's correct.
Nope. Yep.
There is.
10.
There is.
10 or 100.
Yeah, it depends on what there's a few things it depends upon, yeah, but it's whether it's background or a cleanup level, yeah. So one of the other cleanup projects that we have ongoing right now is the GP West capping project. So this is the capping project in what's called the pulp and tissue area of the GP West site, which is the closest to the downtown. It's the downtown waterfront area. It's the area that Harcourt will be working on as they move forward on their development projects. And we're underway right now with a $2 million environmental capping and cleanup project with Ram Construction. And these two panoramic photos they're kind of disorienting sometimes, but I can explain this a little bit. This is looking back towards the tile tanks here, and what you can see here is that the majority of those concrete piles, the crushed concrete material that was staged there, has been graded out and is being graded and consolidated over into what we call the Project South part of the site. And then there's some grading of these hilled areas over in here that are going to be pushed out, and to really level the site, start to prep it for redevelopment. And that's just in the early stages right now, where we're doing some significant grading. And then this is looking back the other way towards the granary, and you can see that there's a fill material that is being graded out, and to start to consolidate and have a flat, just a flat, kind of easily sloped area that will provide building paths in the future. The next few steps are to bring in more fill, clean material, and crushed rock aggregate that'll be the top coat surface. So when this project's finished in August, you'll see a kind of dramatic different look from the bridge looking down onto that site without piles of crushed concrete laying around.
so the slabs of concrete that are shown here, are those just going to be covered?
Correct. They have been perforated in some areas to allow water to drain through, so water doesn't just pool on them. But yeah, they will remain in place. And we've been clear with Harcourt and other future developers that there's a significant amount of buried infrastructure and slabs and foundations that any project, if they want to put in piers or piles or stone columns, anything like that, it's going to have some work to do to deal with the existing conditions below surface.
Okay, you just said something that seems contrary. So you said the concrete slabs have been perforated so water doesn't pool, but I thought part of this entire project was to create a cap that would keep water out, rainwater out.
Right.
So how does that work?
It's kind of confusing because the Cornwall Avenue landfill example is designed to keep water out. So it's designed to take surface water that falls on the site and direct it away from the site so water doesn't filter through, pick up contaminants, and go out to the bay. This portion of the GP West site is actually, it's a soil only where there isn't a groundwater contamination issue, and the soil contaminants there aren't prone to being mobilized or being moved through the groundwater. So we have a significant amount of work with ecology where we've defined that. So this is really just a direct contact cap is what it's called. So it's to prevent plants, people, and animals from getting into contact with the material, getting it on their hands, putting it in their mouths, that kind of thing, where the cap is not designed to be watertight. It doesn't need to be.
Are there places further south of this that will have to have a watertight cap?
Right, that's correct. So
how do you, okay, so this is a challenge, because this stuff takes geological time to sort of occur, right? But let's just imagine there's a line at Laurel Avenue, and south of Laurel is not as pretty underground as it is north of Laurel Avenue. But let's say south of Laurel Avenue, you have your watertight cap, but underground, you're still having water movements or pressure from tidal forces, and I'm assuming from upland forces, and then across the street from Laurel Avenue from rainwater sources. How do you control for that?
we have a really robust remedial investigation for the whole site, for the whole GP north-south sides. And you look at groundwater flow patterns as well as tidal influences. And the groundwater flow patterns from this northern portion, they go out to the bay. So they go from this area straight as as close to is straight out to the Whatcom Waterway. So there's not water that's coming out and going down south through the site. So the water movement has been really well defined. We measure it in dry seasons, wet seasons, over a period of a couple of years actually, to really fully understand the transportation pathways. And so that's been defined, and there isn't a plume that's moving from this area through to the.
And you do that with inspection wells along the edge of the waterway?
Yeah, well,
On the
also,
upland side along the waterway?
yeah, we've installed hundreds of monitoring wells there. We have over 1,000 sample points throughout that whole site. So it's very well characterized. So, and the last one I don't have a slide on is just to give an update that the ITEC property sale and transaction, or not properties, or is that a property sale? Yeah, it is the purchase and sale agreement is moving forward through negotiations now, and I think real estate anticipates having that for the commission's consideration here in the next month or so.
So Brian, leave that photo if you would. I read something in a magazine called The Week recently, and it was a sidebar, which I'm surprised hasn't gotten more attention, but the scientists down in Antarctica are on the ground measuring, not modeling, but actually measuring melting ice on the land. And there is some information suggesting that sea level will rise by 6 feet in the next 50 years if nothing changes. And what nothing is, I don't know, but if nothing changes, that's the expectation. I'm looking at the granary building in the lower part of your photo. That seems like it's relatively safe, but the rest of this property is pretty low. Can you talk about what sort of fill expectations or ground floor expectations we can see across the rest of the site that's lower than the granary first floor?
Yeah, in a little bit here, and maybe if I can table that one and get to one of the slides that shows kind of the road alignment of what some of the work that the city's going on. Sure. Because as you get closer to these bluffs, the roads will come in higher and then slope down. There's certain areas as you get closer to the water, but as you go further away, they're going to be angled back and sloped back up.
Yeah, I haven't necessarily been listening to people that are freaking out about this until I read about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can, if we see old expectations on climate change and increasing sea levels, then these properties are well within what the 100-year expectation would be. But if this new information is correct and it is not modeling its actual measurements, then these properties might be in trouble sooner than later.
Okay. Yeah.
So okay.
So moving on to some of the work that we're doing with our upcoming work, and most of this is some of the work that the city's doing in our partnerships with the city. This is the kind of preliminary design of the Whatcom Waterway Park. The City Parks Department had an open house on June 30th, presented this. It's really a preliminary design, but you can see here this is the granary building. This would be Granary Avenue that's coming in, and this is the first phase of the the Whatcom Waterway Park plan. And they heard a lot of things from the open house, and one of the key things that they heard was they wanted to have this as a soft bank and a access for potential kayak launches or other things. So this showed a potential layback for this beach if there was that to be constructed, and it showed a couple different layouts. If you did the hard bulkhead that's there currently, or had the laid back beach, kind of how that would impact the park programming. So we're working with the city right now, actually, to take a look at that, and we are working on the preliminary design of that with the city to take a look to see what that would take to pull this bulkhead out and lay this shoreline back a bit as they start their design of their park, and to have those two projects come together. Because you've got a really nice cobbly gravel beach that was installed as part of the Whatcom Waterway cleanup that was just completed, and to have public access up above and then have this bulkhead kind of remain in place is something they heard loud and clear from the public and other folks that they wanted to pull that back. So we're working with them on the next steps of that design.
And just to be clear, the port would be paying for this?
It would be, yeah, it would be, it depends on where there's some portions that could be port funded, there's some portions that could be city funded, and that's one of the things we're looking at. We wanted to try to figure out the initial design and then figure out how those two projects could come together and figure out who's paying for what.
I think the city's stance on this is they're not doing anything that requires a permit for the water work. So we would be on the hook for any beach.
I think we're pretty experienced in that. We have a lot of experience working in the water, so I think that would make some sense.
That's fine. Okay.
But if there are park amenities that go along with this beach, that would be a park design.
That would be there, yeah. So expectation on construction timing for this, so we would have to put it in a budget?
Yeah, we're working on that right now. We're working fast and furious to try to figure that out. And we might have this be the second phase of the park, where they design and build the majority of the upland portion, and then reserve this for the next phase of park, but in an immediate next phase, not 5-10 years down the road, but just the next construction season.
So this park that we're seeing here, are they looking at, say, 17 or 18?
They are hoping to be in 17, to have this under construction and completed by the end of 17.
Is this considered in-water work, or is it upland work?
The beach part would be in water at some part, but I think it's it would be a very good project. It would be opening up more water that currently has a vertical bulkhead with some treated timbers. It's a good habitat project, actually. So we'll report back more as that develops.
Thank you.
And the last part here was some of the work we're doing with the parks, and you might have noticed on that figure. I'll go back here. They have anticipated looking at salvaging the acid ball and reusing that as an icon within that waterfront park. So we're working with the city on how that might work and what their arts commission wants to do with that. There's also ongoing work with incorporating other types of industrial icons that were salvaged from the numerous demolition projects that we have. We have them indexed and cataloged, and we'll work with the parks and the developers as that moves forward. Did you have a question, Commissioner?
Commissioner Briscoe?
No, I do not. Very good, Brian. Thank you.
Sorry. And then this is the engineers at the city are hard at work, and this was about the most colorful drawing that I could find, because they're engineers and they're working on this, but at a scale that is not doesn't work really well with presentations. So this is the road alignment that the city engineering team is working on, where they'll be coming in with Granary Avenue on the south side of Granary Building, out to Laurel, and then straight out to Cornwall. The road alignment looks like it's in this configuration. They're looking at some of the detailed parts, like where to have curb cuts, where to have utility vaults, what types of utilities. They are designing the stormwater, the sanitary sewer, and the water lines. And then we're working with them and the franchise utilities like Cascade Natural Gas and Puget Sound Energy on the private utilities like that, as well as the telecom and that sort of thing. So those are in detailed design right now, and there'll be more work as that gets to their 30% and 60% design. And with that, I'll pass it over to Sylvia to talk about the eco districts.
Sylvia Goodwin. Commissioner McCauley asked for an update on eco districts. We put together a really generic slide on what is an eco district, and I'm thinking that if you had specific questions about eco districts, then we could address those either today or at a future meeting. So an eco district is a concept that is actually the Portland Institute of Sustainability first thought of this idea of an eco district, and several of us from the port and the city went down to Portland and took a look at what they're doing. It's a measurement of how do you define sustainability and some of the things that a person would want, both to make it livable and to make a community environmentally sustainable. And I gave you a table that was in your packet that talks about all of the eco-district concepts that are in the Portland Eco-District Toolkit, and then how does that relate to what we're doing here in the waterfront? And at one point, the city even looked at making part of the downtown area, or even Western Washington University, part of an eco-district. We haven't really moved forward with the concept of eco-district far in this community, but what we did was, when we did the Waterfront District Master Plan, we also did a lead for neighborhood design. And what we found is that a lot of the measurements and the concepts from the lead from neighborhood design matched up very well with the eco-district toolkit. So eco-district takes a look at equitable development, meaning things like affordable housing. Do you have transit? Is it walkable, bikeable for people that are low income? It looks at health and well-being, so parks, within walking distance of all of the residential. It looks at community identity. Is it someplace that you recognize or that people know I'm from this area because there's distinguishing features, art and things like that? Access and mobility. I think we probably spent more time in the waterfront district talking about walkable streets, bikeable network of pedestrian facilities, making sure that there was transit. We looked at energy, and there's a lot in energy, both in the waterfront district master plan and in some of the district utility proposals that we've been looking at. So making sure that we have the ability to have solar on the roofs, that we could do hydropower with the water line from Lake Wacom. And then we've talked about district utilities where we would have a hot water or a steam plant that would run hot water through pipes under the streets. And that's something that we are going to bring forward for your further discussion and consideration in August, because we need to make a decision working with the city of Bellingham whether or not we're going to put those conduits below the streets when they build them to connect all the buildings so that we could at some point do the district utility, the district heat. And that decision needs to be made this fall so that we can, as we design the streets, make sure that we have the conduit for it. Water, actually the same thing really with water. We talked about water conservation and having a purple pipe so that you could collect rainwater, use it for irrigation. Those are all things that either you can do it on an individual site, collecting the rainwater or the roof water and using it for irrigation on your site, or you put it into a purple pipe that then can go to another site or to irrigate parks. That's something that once we build the roads, we want to make sure all of those things are under the roads so you don't have to dig them up later to add it. And then we also, the eco district talks about habitat and cleanup and materials management being recycling and reuse of materials, which we've done a lot of. And also, all through our plan, we require that future tenants have recycling, composting, and facilities to make sure that the waste is managed well. So that's Eco District in a nutshell. I'm not sure if, Mr. McCauley, when you put this on the agenda, did you have something in particular in mind about Eco Districts?
I do. First, Commissioner Briscoe, you have any questions about eco districts right now?
No, not right now, Mike.
All right, Commissioner Robbins.
Who pays for all these additional? Is it going to be the city? Is it going to be us? Is it going to be Harcourt? Is it going to be the tenant?
So this is one of the conversations that the commission was engaged in many years ago. And if you look at the waterfront master plan, it was, to be kind, watered down and backed away from a lot of the eco-district concepts being put into practice. So they're not in the master plan. There's some suggestions about them, and but there are no requirements in the master plan for any of the eco-district concepts. So the question I would have about this is there is an appetite here to move forward in an eco-district. I know that some members of the current city council are interested in having a conversation about it again, but we've locked ourselves into an 18-acre compact with Harcourt, and I'd be interested to find out where Harcourt's principles are on these concepts and how far down the road they would like to go with them, because it does get to the point of if there is purple pipe installed, and I know the city's engaged 2020 engineering to look at what that would be and how it would be, or a district heat plan where you've got pipes in the street, and apparently this fall is the time to make the decision. But a lot of this is going to be predicated on whether or not the people we've engaged to develop the property are interested in engaging or in using these in the future. So I would say let's ask Harcourt where they are on this, and I would love to hear from the city council if they would like to revisit this and have a discussion with us and Harcourt to see if maybe there would be a little more movement towards some of these eco-district concepts. I'm putting them into practice now, especially since we have Harcourt starting the project, and so we aren't sort of in a situation where we don't know who's going to be doing what, and now we know who's going to be doing what. So.
Would we have to amend the agreement? Yes.
The question is, would you have to amend the MDA? No. The MDA contemplates further cooperation, so that would be an agreement where Harcourt would say, whatever the economics of district-wide heat and putting it into buildings and all that. No, you don't have to amend the MDA.
And we've had a lot of initial conversation with Harcourt. We've provided them copies of some of the studies on particularly district heating, and they said they're interested. They'd like to hear more about it. They'd like to know what does it cost and what's the economics of it. And I think that the issue that we're all looking at right now is the information that we have is it's going to take an initial $2 million of investment or so, and we can give you the details next week. Our next meeting, we're going to tee that up for discussion before you ask for this update. Probably the city would have to put up $1 million in the port, or Harcourt, somebody would have to put up the other $1 million. And the information we have, it would be about a 10-year or 12-year return before that that money was saved. And again, all of that depends on the pace of development. If you build 2 or 3 fairly large buildings early, then it makes sense a lot faster. So I think it's a little unknown what the payout or how long it would be, and we have not discussed the details with Harcourt as to who would put up, if we do decide to put the pipes under the road, who would pay the initial $1 million, and how would we recoup those charges? So that's something we need to further explore. But if that's what you're interested in finding, let's have a further discussion in August, and maybe we can talk to Harcourt between now and then.
So I know these concepts are always really challenging to put into practice, and the most simple one would be the dual system for water use and reuse. Mm-hmm. So there's no shortage of opportunity to use pretty clean water in lots of municipal areas. Golf courses are the easy one. Blaine is doing that right now. Mm-hmm. But somebody's got to put the pipe in. And when it comes down to budgets, it's easier to put in or replace a single pipe and deal with the one other pipe going to the wastewater treatment plant than it is to put in 2 pipes that are one of them going basically to nobody for a long time. So that's, that's why I think these concepts die in practice so often, because you don't have anybody to use them right now. That's the problem with district heating. We have plenty of opportunity to tap into the Encogen plant, but there's nobody to use the end product. Yep.
And it might help also, we've talked about at one point we had a fairly large user we were looking at for the Lignan building, which we're now looking at hopefully a different user. If we can get somebody in the Lignan building, if we can get iTech in the 800 Cornwall, and there maybe with solar panels on the top producing power, and suddenly there starts to be bigger than just what's at Harcourt. If we get something happening in the log pond that has a draw or a use or produces. At one point when we were talking about something that would have cold storage in the Lignan warehouse, could it produce waste heat that could feed into the grid? And we've also talked about using the city's sewer station that's in that area to get waste heat off the sewer line. So we'll bring you more information, but no matter what we all decide, it's got to be decided fairly soon this fall, or we've got to go in later and tear up streets and retrofit them, which is always possible. It's never too late, but it's easier if you do it before you build the streets and before you build the first 3 or 4 buildings that have a boiler and their own heat system. They're not going to want to connect later.
So when you say this fall, what's the decision, the final decision date? Let's say district heating.
Well, Fritz at the city says he would like us to give him some indication on what we're doing about district heat and then natural gas and electricity by the middle of August, which your next meeting isn't until August 16th, so that's not going to likely happen. They're not talking about getting the final design and permits and going out to bid until, I think, October last I heard. Or no, they were going to get permits in October and bid it in January. So I think if we can't do it in August, probably September or so, it's something we definitely need to talk about in this year's budget if we're going to budget money.
So step 1, let's remind Fritz that August is not fall.
Right. I don't know, everybody, I'm seeing back to school stuff in the stores
Fall's
right now.
Fall's not till November, damn it.
Yeah,
all right.
exactly.
I wish. This is part of the reason I'd like to be amicable to things that Harcourt comes up with, like using the board mill and so on, so that we could get these types of things through when they come up. I'm trying to put myself in Harcourt's position on how they would look at this. There's some good ideas, but there's going to be some expenses to Harcourt, no question. But we should work with them as best we can as well, so we can both gain from it.
Well, it seems like the expensive one would be, and let's talk to Western, district heating is going to be the big expensive thing here, because an extra pipe, the extra plastic pipe in the ground next to a trench is, what's it cost? Cost of the pipe, right? So that's nothing, but the heat system, the district heating system is, and it's really reliant, as what I understand, on Western future needs. So Rob, can you talk to somebody up there and
Oh,
see
absolutely.
where they might be?
We'll reach out to Western. I think you're spot on the pipe. I want to caution us that I think a lot of times what happens here is we tend to want to engineer the whole thing at the very beginning, and that's where a lot of these fees come from. So when we're talking about $2 million worth of fees, my guess is, or $2 million worth of expense, my guess is a lot of that is engineering type fees and not just a pipe in the ground. And the reason you go do that is because you don't want to put the pipe in the wrong place. But if we know the pipe has to go under the road and we make sure the pipe is big enough, then it seems like we're covering our bases, if I'm not making that too simple. I don't know. But I'm just cautioning us that we could go down this $2 million road just to really over-engineer it. I like your idea of digging a trench and throwing a pipe down there and using it later.
Well, I tell you, I learned a valuable experience from a guy I worked for when I was in college. And he told me to go dig a hole where he thought there was a plastic pipe he put in a couple of decades earlier. And I said, well, what's in the pipe? He says, nothing. So why are we digging it up? He says, because I thought I might put a shop up there someday on that hill. There's an empty pipe waiting for something in it, and ended up having didn't have a water line in it. We used it for an electric conduit. And I said, well, didn't that cost money? He said, no, I was already digging a pipe for a water line halfway there anyway. So it was just the cost of the pipe. But I understand the engineering issues.
So you found the pipe, though?
Found the pipe and built
Nice.
a gigantic shop for the biggest motorhome I've ever seen. So, yeah. But he paid me well. $11 an hour. Yes. Yeah.
Well, we'll bring more in August when we come back. And then also, Rob has been trying to get a meeting date set up for Harcourt to come in September. So it seems like that would be a real timely time to talk about their second project, their third project, district heating, and a lot of other issues as they all tie together. So we'll stand by in August, which is not fall.
Yeah.
Commissioner McCauley.
Commissioner
Yes.
Briscoe, you have some questions?
Well, I have some information for you. The first day of fall is September 22nd.
See, there you go.
Oh, good. Okay. Parker could
That's
even
what-
be here by fall.
I have no questions. That's very well explained.
Okay.
Thank you,
I
Sylvia.
have one more slide. Last meeting, there was discussion about acres and how much is industrial and how much is commercial mixed use. And this slide, I just realized, Commissioner Briscoe, you don't have these slides yet, so you have to wait 15 seconds till you can see it.
Yeah, it'll be a few seconds before I
Okay.
can see it, but go ahead.
This slide shows how much acreage and what the zoning is in the existing waterfront master plan. So we have the marine trades, which is 58 acres, which is industrial, log pond 52 acres industrial, and the shipping terminal 25. So we have a total of 135 acres that is for industrial. And again, the industrial mixed use allows some commercial buildings, no residential buildings. And then the downtown waterfront, the pink, which is also the purple, is the institutional mixed use. So together, those are 37 acres. Those are commercial. Then the Cornwall Beach area is also pink. The zoning is commercial mixed use, but the use is going to be a park. So there, at one point, we had a commercial development pad in there where we were thinking we could put 400 or 500 condos or some buildings. Now that the city has acquired that property, we've traded it with the city. They're not so much interested in putting commercial or residential there. There might be something in the order of a Woods coffee shop like Boulevard, but they're not talking about the commercial development we had. So that skews the numbers a little bit. There's really not 66 acres commercial, there's 37. And then within there, there's 33 acres of parks and roads, and they run through the commercial and industrial areas. But there's a greater number of parks and a greater density of streets in the commercial area than in the industrial. So that'll take more of the land will come out of the commercial. So anyway, about 1/3 commercial and 2/3 industrial, and that's really all this slide shows.
Sylvia, can we break these down a little bit? In the marine trades area, which includes the ASB, does that 58 acres include the roughly 28 of the ASB?
I do not think so. I think that is just the upland
Just
acres.
upland?
Yeah.
Okay. How much is not owned by the port? So you've got a bit of the city, about
The
2
port-
that's private, and then some.
Yeah, sanitary services has a big
SSC.
swath through the middle, and then there's an electrical substation, and there's the piece that's now owned by the bank that used to be Abenal, probably 10 or so acres altogether. And then the cogen is
That's not,
five,
but that's
6
not marine
acres in the
trade.
middle.
Is
Yeah.
the cogen in the log pond?
The cogen is within the log pond industrial area. So there's the cogen, and then the city has a little sewer pump station in there.
So does the log pond area that you're measuring 52 acres, does that go clear back to the bluff?
Yeah, it goes
Across
back
the
to the
tracks?
bluff. So that includes the area where iTech is, but part of it also is the railroad and the bluff.
Okay. And
When you say log pond at 52, you are including the cogen and
Yeah, the
ITEC.
cogen and the 800 Cornwall and all that land back along the tracks. And that also includes the Burlington Railroad swath through the middle. That's just the net.
so the marshaling yard back there, if that is the proper term for it, that's not port-owned property, is it?
Some of
The
it
banding
is,
yard
most
and all
of it
that?
isn't. So the railroad owns most of those blocks back behind, and the port owns just where iTech is in front of it. And then the county owns a little bit in the crisscross in the middle too.
Oh, that's up, okay. So I'm looking at the polygon there, and the gray area that runs up against the bluff, that's kind of, so you can see the railroad track
Some county.
in the yard there. So
Yeah.
that area, I guess, to the right of that track is kind of unusable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wet and,
Well,
okay. There's a
eventually, if the
pond in there.
railroad moves back there.
Yeah.
If you would like, I can bring you another map at the next meeting that has ownership and acreage. How much land does the port actually own? Because it's considerably less than that when you add up. And once you subtract out the roads, the parks, and all of that, I think at one point we calculated we only have about 90 net developable acres.
So the research I did when I was working on my graduate thesis, it turns out, like in the downtown waterfront area, the typical urban landscape, about half of the land is developable once you take out alleys, plazas, sidewalks, streets, all that other stuff. So the 30-plus acres in the downtown waterfront is really only about 15 developable acres.
That's about, well, we calculated it at 18 acres for Harcourt, but even Harcourt's 18.9 acres includes, they still have to put some local streets within that. So you're probably about right.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Yeah, that was just, and I can bring more information on ownership. But, we also did look, you were envisioning, and I was actually thinking that there was something that talks about the total square footage, and there was in the environmental impact statement, and there was some information on total building square footage in the development agreement, but they were ranges enough that you really, when you tried to add them all up and put them in a pie chart, you really couldn't conclude much. So I was going to put together a nice pie chart, and still I started looking at it, and it looked more like a cobbler.
All right. So I'm very interested in the ownership picture here, because I think we recently found out we have some railroad crossings that we have to deal with. Here.
Correct.
I think 3 of them. So I think they're in Fairhaven. In fact, here there's a crossing on Laurel. Do we know if that's a city or a port-owned parcel?
That's a city crossing.
It's
That's
a city crossing, and Laurel is a city road.
Yeah. Okay.
Will be.
Okay. Yeah, I'd definitely like to see that.
Okay, yeah,
ownership.
we have very good information on the ownership, and part of the railroad right-of-way through it is a right-of-way and an easement. Part of it is owned outright, so we've got that map pretty well, too.
Frank, could you have your people put together for the commission, what does it mean when the railroad has an easement across port property?
Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, I can tell you, and I'll put something together. When they have an easement, they have a right to use it for a railroad and for nothing else. When they own it in fee, they can use it for whatever they want. They can tear the railroad up and sell the parcel. The problem for railroads, of course, is the parcels are substandard, so they can't use it they don't meet any development regulations. But historically, the railroad has acquired either property through easements or through fee ownership. And but I'll put a little memo together on the different rights. So easement's less of a right. The city roads are rights of way, which is a form of an easement. And in the south side of Bellingham, of course, you see over there where the landowners have built parking structures underneath the road. It's very common in Seattle because the landowner owns to the center line of the road, and they build a parking structure under the road. The city only has a right to use the top surface. And there's some discussion here whether we're going to provide the city easements for the roads with rights of way, which is a type of easement, or fee simple for the road. And if we provide them rights of way, then we can reserve parking structures or something underneath the roads. And if we provided fee simple, we'd have to reserve it in a different way. So those discussions the staff is doing right now to try and figure out what the proper mix of the major arterials are.
Super, thank you.
In fact, we've been looking lately about should we put parking under the parks. It's a little late right now for the Granary Park, but the other parks, either the Commercial Green or the new Nike Swoosh Park along the back, would be at an elevation if we were looking at sea level rise in the long term, and if we were looking at this whole idea of we want the town to gradually step down to the waterfront, it would make sense to put 1 or 2 layers of parking under that park and have that park a little higher. So there's lots of ideas that we can still look at on that.
And we're still looking at that because we reserve the right either to transfer it via easements or fee for the parks. And so their interest is the surface, our interest may be underneath. Interestingly, the port owns the property underneath I-5 out by the airport, and the Department of Transportation has an easement over port property to put I-5.
Okay.
So if you want to put a parking structure under I-5, we can work on that for you.
How about a road? Can we put a road under I-5? Somebody wants a road up there. You have a fascinating job, Mr. Schmall. Commissioner Briscoe, Sylvia's wrapped up here. Do you have anything for her?
No. Nope. That was very explanatory. Thank you.
Commissioner Robbins?
I have nothing, thank you.
All right, super. Thank you so much, Sylvia. We are out of anything. You don't have anything to add, right? All right, so new business, Commissioner Robbins?
We have a third item, don't we? Update.
We had one more update, I think.
Oh, my apologies. Yes, we do have a comp plan update from Sylvia. Sorry about that, Sylvia.
And this is a fairly...
You were just trying to get around that, weren't you?
Yeah. Actually, this is going to be fairly painless. Sylvia Goodwin, Planning and Development Director. We've been closely tracking the county comprehensive plan update, and I brought to you last meeting some concerns about Chapter 2, which is land use, and how the county council was addressing the Cherry Point urban growth area. And I've distributed to you at the last meeting and another copy of what the county was looking at. Well, the county had a meeting, the county council had a meeting, and got quite a lot of citizen comment on it and referred that to the planning commission of the county. So I do not believe that the county is going to be able to finish reviewing those Cherry Point amendments this year and still adopt them as part of their 2016 docket. They have a resolution that is supposed to be in their county council packet tomorrow, referring the issue to the planning commission, and they said that they were going to give the planning commission some direction as to time, and we haven't seen that yet. So check the county council if you're interested, and you'll see it tomorrow. Some of the proposed changes that I was concerned about that I brought you last time are still in that text that's going to be considered for the planning commission. So I guess the only update is that's what's happening, and the question is, does the commission still want to track this, and do you want to weigh in the future once it gets settled a little bit as far as what the planning commission recommends and gets back to the county council?
So a few people have approached me on this. I think Commissioner Briscoe may have. I don't know if Commissioner Robbins has. The last time the Port Commission weighed in on anything officially regarding Cherry Point, it was a letter to Commissioner Goldmark about the aquatic reserve, which I think they were wrapping up at the time. That was in 2010. This is a little bit different question, but I think certainly the commission has time. If we want to update our thoughts on Cherry Point, we can certainly do that. So.
Okay.
I think it's important that if we're talking about job creation and retention, that we should weigh in on it at some point.
And I agree with Commissioner Robbins and Commissioner McCall. Yes, we need to weigh in at some point in time.
Thanks, Sylvia. And,
Okay.
you know, I was a little remiss on dismissing everybody. I have a couple of questions I'm hoping that Brian might be able to help me out with. It was about your presentation.
That's okay.
You were mentioning the road alignments
Oh, right.
at some point and the height of those roads.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was what I suggested we might table for a second, and never got back to it. So yeah, in this road alignment, as you note, so this is at a higher elevation here, and so it comes in as you noted in that photo that I had earlier, the panoramic photo, that's at a pretty good elevation. It has and the grading project that we have then will drop down fairly quickly, and then it's going to be relatively flat throughout this whole area. The road, though, it'll slowly come down, and they'll be bringing in a fair amount of fill as they build that road up until it meets to the current grade at Laurel, and then the Laurel Road will connect back up with the Cornwall grade. So that Laurel grade will be pretty close to the current grades that are out there right now. There will be some fill to bring it in, but this Granary Avenue actually has a fair amount of fill. And this park footprint as well, there'll be a fair amount of fill that gets brought in there because there's about a 10-foot grade difference from the entrance at Central to the current grades that are out there now. So there'll be a lot of fill that'll be brought up to raise the grades in this area. And then as you work back further, depending on how the overall layout of the site goes, you know, we've talked for years about the connection to downtown, as Sylvia discussed as well, is that to have a gradual connection from the current downtown grade down to the waterfront. And so there will be if we are following that concept, that this grade at Bay Street here, you know, that's significantly above the current grade of the majority of the GP site. So I think it's to 20 to 30 feet at least. Does that sound right? And so the majority of the development back in this area will have to come up to that grade in a variety of different ways, whether it's through subgrade parking or fill slopes and fill material. I think the majority of that probably will be in through parking structures, which have a dual use that way. The sea level rise considerations, though, as you mentioned, the environmental impact statement that was done for the waterfront district as a whole assumed 2.4 feet of sea level rise, and that's what these are currently being designed to. However, the master plan or the sub-area plan also has a component where projects will be evaluated on a best available science. So as new information comes up and is vetted and goes through the process of being fully accepted, not that every concept has to be accepted by everyone, but vetted through the typical scientific process, and that we can reevaluate rather than just one study, but maybe like the UW climate group or other established entities start to look at sea level rise with a new number. Then we can start looking project by project at the best available science. So these are currently designed at the 2.4 feet, though.
Okay. And also, I talked to, I think her name is Gina, not recalling her last name, works at Parks, is working on the design.
Correct, Gina Austin.
Gina Austin, thank you. I told her that I am very interested, and I'm going to work on Commissioner Robbins and Briscoe about this as well, and tying the GP Wharf into this new park. I think we have an opportunity there. It's twofold. One is we can't afford to take it down, right? And it's still functional, and we can use it to tie things to. But the other side is we can provide public access without having to rebuild a bank in a way that's much more costly if we tore the thing out. So if there's a possibility, and if the commission supports it, I would definitely think that we can take advantage of that wharf and tie it to that park sooner than later. So.
I believe that's the direction the staff is going as well on this, although we would ask that we be allowed to skinny that pier down. We don't believe it needs to be as wide as it is, and that way we can save on maintenance of the pier if we can skinny it down. So I think you'll see us bringing some proposals in that regard to you.
Okay, great. The image we're seeing here with the temporary moorage, I've shared this with some of the city staff, so I'm hoping that it's going to be incorporated. Really nervous about where that's located because of the C Street Terminal across the way. And I know we talked about this at our budget retreat, so I'm hoping the city staff is hearing it as well, because I know that there's a definite desire from the commission to have the temporary mortgage. I think the staff as well, everybody's supporting this, the city's supporting it. I think we just have to make sure that they're seeing and also showing the public what the temporary mortgage or the day use mortgage might look like.
Yeah, that's right. And this is a placeholder for now. And we meet with the city's team, both the parks, the port, and the city streets team get together every other week and talk through the details of each of these components. And we've been clear that location is fine for now to be shown on a kind of cartoon map. But we've asked that they, look a little bit bigger picture and that we do exactly what you asked, and that we've provided them even with the typical barge sizes. So even if they are turned one way versus another, that those are not interfering with vice versa, that the temporary mortgage is not interfering with the barge operations.
Cool.
So this is a placeholder for now.
When you say temporary mortgage, it's not temporary mortgage for a boat, it's temporary mortgage in the drawing as of today.
Well, it's both. It's a kind of a day use mortgage. This is not, it wouldn't be a permanent mortgage area, but it's actually that temporary serves both purposes. So
It's a permanent dock, but it's a permanent dock with transient
Temporary
mortgage.
drawing, yeah.
transient mortgage, yeah.
But it is a permanent dock.
Oh, okay.
No, it's not going to be exactly where it's shown in this rendering.
Right.
And we need to work with the other side of the waterway to make sure we're not inhibiting their ability to bring barges in and turn them perpendicular to the waterway.
Brian, one other question. You had 2.4 feet is figured in over what period of time is that sea level rise?
I believe that's over the 100-year duration. Is that correct? Yeah, it's over the 100-year time frame.
Big difference between that and your 6 feet and 50 years.
Yeah, the 2.4 is based on modeling, not actual measurements, though.
Yeah, I think that as the climate science matures, that there'll be a revision to that number. I mean, there's a point where you have to make a decision, and that's what the best available science at the time was, and we were aware of it, so we put that caveat in there that we, as that information becomes more available, that we'll adjust. Some of the design parameters, though, are also built into that. That's why some of the park and public access are in the most susceptible to sea level rise versus a high valued hospital or something. You're going to build accordingly and design your land use accordingly.
Yeah, I like this concept of having the parking, maybe even 2 layers of parking underneath. When I looking at this originally, it seemed like 1,000 square or some spaces back along the bluff, and a structured parking might make sense, but 2 floors of parking might make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And you can have that right away. You don't have to wait for years for it to get used up either. So, yeah. Anything further?
Any other questions?
Okay. Now I think we're done with our regular. Yeah. I'm sorry about that, Sylvia. My apologies.
I have a question about the sea level rise. At what point do we have to make a final decision on the actual height we're going to use for this development?
Well, I think, thanks, Commissioner. I think, as part of the environmental impact statement, we use that 2.4 feet of sea level rise as the number that is going to be used as projects are developed. So as they come through the permitting process, that is the assumption that they have to design to. So each project will have, its own particular design, and if it doesn't meet those criteria, then they'd have to adjust. But for now, we're assuming, and actually, a lot of the site will be coming up just through the nature of the capping, as well as the nature of the fill for the parks and the roads. So a fair amount of the site will actually be at a higher elevation just by default than it is today. So I think each project by project goes through that process. Does that answer your question?
Well, yes and no. When we're through putting our grade in, we're through capping and we're done with that, how many feet above mean high water at this point in time will we be? Oh,
I see. It depends. Right now, the site is, it's variable, but the entrance to the Central Avenue, from the Central Avenue Pier into the park in this area, which is kind of a higher grade, that's between 16 and 17 feet above mean low water. And so that's a grade that is relatively safe for that sea level rise issues. As you get closer down into the beach area and you're into some of the lower grades, and as Laurel comes down, or sorry, as Granary comes down to connect up with Laurel, it is going to be coming down to a lower grade. And I can get those details of what the final finished grades based on the road design are, and I can send those out to the commission. We'll get those from the city's design team if you'd like.
Well, you gave me the mean low water, 15 or 16 feet from mean low water. What is it from mean high water?
Sorry. Well, let me take a look. And Mike, do you have some input on that?
15 feet plus.
What's that red line where it says the proposed elevation 10.2?
That's ordinary high water line, 10.2.
So Mike Hogan, Public Affairs Administrator. So the mean high is 8.9 feet, and the top of bank ranges from anywhere from 12 to 15 feet, depending on where you are. And then, within the Whatcom Waterway Park, you're going to have a minimum of 2 to 3 feet of fill, so it'll raise that site grade up. And then I believe the road elevation is going to be about 10 feet, between 8 to 10 feet above that. It slopes down, so. And the rest of the site will be built higher than that. So there's, if you start at mean high at 8.9, and then top of banks 12 feet, you have over 3 feet of buffer, and then within the park you get an additional 2 to 3 feet of fill built on up to the road. So you're already at 6+ feet by the time you get back to the road. If that makes sense.
So I guess what I'm hearing is, if we build to the recommendations that you've got of 2.4 feet now, what we're doing is actually will be more than that.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll be
and our 6 feet above mean high water is at 14 feet. And am I hearing we're going to be at 15 to 16 feet with the low side of the park? Is that what I heard you say?
Correct.
Okay, so we're actually, the newfound information that Commissioner McCauley spoke of, we're actually going to be a foot higher than that 50-year sea level rise with what we're building now.
Correct. I haven't seen the final design elevations of Granary Avenue, but I've talked to Fritz, the city engineer, about that, and yeah, we'll be well above that.
So we'll get you guys the exact numbers, because we're talking about here, and this approximate 16 feet is for this park area, and then the Granary is a little higher than that, but we'll get you the final elevations of Granary and Laurel, and that'll kind of dictate what the rest of the site is, I would think.
Thank you.
My concern is less with the buildings that'll be constructed, because it's a simple engineering feat to add under floor, first floor parking. And if you lose it in the future, you can, backfill it with gravel or something and lose a floor parking. So I'm not too worried about that. But in the grander scheme of the entire waterfront district, there's how many acres again total? A few hundred, right? Between Fairhaven and maybe not a few hundred. I shouldn't say that, but over 200 acres between Fairhaven and the rest of the port properties around the bay, all of which are low. So those are concerns that future commissions are certainly going to have to understand. And it makes me wonder, what are we looking at in the next few years that we should think about future-proofing them from any sea level rise?
Yeah, that's a great point, and we went through this discussion a number of times when we were in the sub-area plan process, and so for a number of our marine infrastructure type of properties, where you want to be as close to the water as possible, where you're flashing boats or doing other marine related activities, we have an adaptive plan. That's one where you would adapt over time to sea level rise rather than planning for something when you have a kind of an unknown change with a wide range of possibilities. So our C Street terminal, for example, the bulkheads in and around there, we have designed that so you could adapt to that condition over time. Mm-hmm. Whereas this area, the waterfront district and the parks and roads, we have anticipated building above, the minimum, and then, like Mike had indicated, those roads will already be built up even further. So,
all right, here's an interesting question: armoring. So shoreline armoring in Puget Sound is challenging nowadays versus in the past. Is there any discussion about future armoring as properties, let's say Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park? All right, so the southern part's already low, and so we take a plan to add a couple of feet of fill, maybe say like 4 feet. We're gonna have to add some shoreline in there, some shoreline armoring in there.
That's a good question. I think, and Adam, you might have some input on this as well. That's almost on a case-by-case basis, based on the conditions and the use and the needs of that particular facility. I think if there's some of the things you'll see is not just a inundation, but it's more like storm damage. It's like high storm events during high tide conditions. So repairing those after an event and armoring them to accommodate it. But if you have a change in land use, you might do something differently. So I think those are majorly on a case-by-case basis. But we are seeing the need for, addressing high energy events. And as sea level rise occurs, you'll start to see that.
I think also, Bobby, I'm not sure if you're totally familiar with the habitat conservation plans that Department of Natural Resources have been putting together. But the WPPA has pushed back in that, and ports are currently exempt from the HCP programs, but I think it's something we should definitely keep an eye on as we move forward on these things. Anything further? Anything further, Commissioner Briscoe?
No.
Okay, cool. So new business. I was a little early back there before. Commissioner Robbins.
I have nothing.
All right, Commissioner Briscoe, any new business?
It's new and old both together, just the short thing, and it has to do with our meeting times. I've had some feedback on email stuff, and I'd like to clarify some things to some folks. It's not necessarily how many people have showed up to these meetings to this point that the times have been changed, but it's about the availability for people to come. Whether they come or not is their choice, and whether they come or not should not be the decision, should not be how we decide whether we take away the opportunity for people to come when they want to. I just wanted to clarify that it's, it's been said to me in certain emails that it's a waste of time, our break is a waste of time, and then those folks have all the new amenities, so to speak, like YouTube to watch and the internet services and so forth. But a lot of people don't have that, believe it or not. And if those people need to come to a meeting, I would certainly like to make it as easy for the public to come to the meetings as possible. And I think our times are just fine, in my opinion. That's all I have to say at new business.
That's all your new business?
That's all my new business.
Okay. I'm going to bring up a conversation about the community boating center lease. We're putting together that now. Is that correct? A new lease now?
We are. We've negotiated a lot of terms with the lease. I think we have agreement on majority of those terms. There's still an outstanding item, and I'm hoping, I understand the Community Boating Center board met this morning. I don't know the results of that meeting, but I'm hoping that we've got a deal coming to you very soon.
Okay. So with the commission's support, I'd like to strongly suggest that we get the Community Boating Center on the new lease as soon as possible, and we'll have a discussion about the what they see as an overpayment since 2013 and see how we can work with them on that part of it. But definitely getting them on the new lease would be a good priority. So I think there may be something we can do in 2017 in regards to public access over in Fairhaven at the Community Boating Center area at the boat launch. So if Commissioner Briscoe and Robbins are supportive of that, I think that's the right direction to go forward.
Absolutely.
To getting them a new lease.
Well, first the new lease, and then the other points that they're discussing. They're much harder points, and part of what they were discussing was going to get us in the legal situation. We wouldn't pass an audit, so we have to definitely have to figure out how to get there with that. Sound good?
Understood.
All right, and then I understand the Lignin building. We had something sort of on the hook for that, but that's
we did. We have another tenant now that is interested in the building, but we had one that we thought was very interested. In fact, we thought they may even buy the building, but their board met and they chose not to go that route. It seemed to be too big of a project for what that company wanted to absorb at that time.
Okay, so we today, I think, sent out. We're going to put in a bid, or do a bid process coming up soon.
You're talking about for the repairs to the Lignin building?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Those are now back on.
So,
we did put those on hold because of the tenant. We didn't want to do those repairs, and then, so yes, those are back on.
And they're back on. Are they as designed originally?
Yeah, I mean, Adam can speak to that better than I can, but we're talking about bringing in water and electricity and cleaning up the roof.
Yeah, Commissioners, Adam Fulton, Director of Facilities. We still have those base improvements kind of at our fingertips, but honestly, I think there might be some internal discussion whether it's still the right move, still appropriate, or whether there's another tenant that might be interested or something else. So I think there's a bit of internal discussion before we pull the trigger, so to speak.
We won't pull the trigger without, of course, consulting the Port Commission.
Well, when we lost that potential tenant, I walked away from my hard push on the exposition hall concept. But if it's possible to move that direction now, I would certainly ask Commissioners Briscoe and Robbins to support that so we can get that building into service for some useful use for Whatcom County. But it sounds like there may be another possibility. Is that what I'm hearing?
We do have a potential customer for the Lignum building. They've looked at it twice. They probably would rather me not say who they are today. They'll be back at the building on Friday, and then we'll be able to give the commission more updated information.
Okay, great. All right, Commissioner Briscoe, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in there. I'd like to move forward with the bid process for the power and the water and the amenities to get them in there. I mean, if we keep waiting and keep waiting and keep waiting, hopefully a new tenant will come, but that stuff's going to have to come there anyway, sooner or later. So I would think that we would want to move forward with our bid, getting a bid process on getting the amenities in there.
Yeah, Commissioner Briscoe, I wouldn't disagree, and even though I have a penchant for the exposition hall, those would be services that would be required anyway, so it wouldn't be wasted money.
Well, that was kind of my point. The services are going to be required. Hopefully, you could always hope that someone was going to come and do it to the building themselves, but regardless, the services are going to be required.
Yeah, and these are really very basic, generic improvements. So, I would agree at some point that we pull the plug and get those improvements done.
Sounds good. Anything further, Commissioner Briscoe?
No.
Commissioner Robbins?
No.
All right, Rob?
Well, we are entering my favorite 3 weeks of the year, and no offense to you gentlemen, we don't meet again until late August. But I just want to tell you that I'm going to be out the 7th through the 12th of August. I'll be out several Fridays between now and then, and a couple other days here and there, and that's what makes it my favorite 3 days.
Like a European holiday.
It is, yes.
Thanks for that. That is an important thing to remind people. We are not meeting the first week in August.
That's right.
All right, so we will be back in whatever the second or third week, whatever that date is.
Is it the
Anybody know
19th,
what that
Diane?
date is?
August 17th?
16th.
16th?
16th.
All
Yeah,
right.
That's
so-
my
so
anniversary.
we'll all have a month off from each other. Not that we need it. Frank, Cameron? No, sir. Senior staff, anybody? All right, any of the members of the public that are here? All right, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.